morning, everyone. Let's get started. So, a couple of weeks ago, when we just learned about the session that we are going to do in this convergence, and we learned about the date and time when we are going to do that, it got us a little bit worried. 9 a.m. in the morning, right after St. Patrick's Day. And I'm so happy to see full room over here, so no concern about attendance. Thank you so much for making up your time to spend this hour and a half to talk about financial budgets. My name is Sigita Chapaitine. I'm Senior Program Manager with Microsoft. Last 3 years, I'm working with budgeting functionality in Microsoft Dynamics AX. Together with me is Neil Robinson. He's Senior Engineering Lead. Responsible for budget planning functionality and for taxes. So if you have a tax-related question in Dynamics AX, make sure that you talk to Neil as well. It's an honor to present for me with Neil today because he's actually one of the people who have started budget planning functionality. You could call him a father of a lot of things that we are going to show you today. Session is about financial budgets, about budgeting, planning, and forecasting in Dynamics AX. Before this demo, this session will be really full of demos. We will spend most of the time watching things in AX, and we will try to showcase you some of the things and give you some thoughts how you could implement it for you or if you're a partner for your customers. But before we get there, let's do a really quick overview of the functionality as such. So, how Microsoft Dynamics AX can help you to do planning, budgeting, and forecasting. So, if we are talking about planning activities, budget planning activities, either it's long-term strategic budget planning or short-term annual budget planning, all of those activities can be achieved in Dynamics AX using a document that we are calling budget plan document. So what's so special about that document and how can it help you? So this document has a very rich integration with Microsoft Excel. So essentially, one budget plan document can have multiple Excel workbooks attached to it that you can keep and maintain at any point of time, where you can keep different versions of your budget for different stages of your budget planning process. So essentially, you can keep a workbook that you will have your initial baseline amounts of the budget that will have one shape, and you will have one set of financial dimensions you are going to look at. And you can have a different version of the budget that will be, let's say, reviewed by some LT management budget on a different level and have different amounts in there. So a lot of integration with Excel, we are going to show that through the demos. And we will talk about the details, what's available, and how can you budget really easily using this tool. Another good thing about budget plan document is ability to use the workflow. So how many of you are actually AX users? Okay, quite a big part. Okay. So if you are using Dynamics AX, you might be using the workflow in different places of the application, like purchase order documents, journals, and so on. So anywhere where you need to push the document through the stages to get that from the initial stage reviewed by somebody and approved, you can use the workflow for that purpose. In budget planning, we also are using the workflow. We are leveraging it pretty heavily. So we are using the same workflow framework as old application. On top of that, we have developed a couple additional capabilities, especially for budget planning, like ability to distribute amounts from your top level to departments or aggregate them back from your bottom level back to the top. And similar things like that. Do some allocations as a part of the workflow instead of making people do those allocations manually. When we get budget plan document reviewed and approved, finalized, when your planning activity is over for that specific budget cycle, we are transferring the document from budget plan, so-called budget register entry document. Budget register entry document is essentially your approved budget your company is going to execute against. So this document has ability to turn on budget control on top of it. So essentially, if there are some type of sensitive expenses in your company that you really want to be careful about and make sure you are not spending more than you have budgeted for, you can turn on budget control that will at any time when person is entering a document, let's say purchase order or purchase requisition, you can decide about the level when that control should get started. So that when you are turning on budget control, person will be either prevented from posting more than they have in their budget, or they might be warned about it. And we will have, again, some demos today to showcase you how this can be achieved and how it looks for the end user and how we can manage this process throughout the year. And finally, throughout the year, our budgeting activities are not over, and most of you probably are doing rolling forecasts. So essentially, and periodically, like every quarter, or I know some people are doing even every month, they want to take a snapshot of their budget. They want to take that they have for the current year. They want to take a snapshot of their actuals, what they have accumulated so far. And based on that, they want to make a forecast where actually the company is going based on those two numbers. So essentially, all of those activities, forecasting activities, can be achieved in Microsoft Dynamics AX using budget plan document that we use for planning activities as well. We have a set of periodic processes that we are going to showcase some of them as well today, where you will see how you can easily grab a snapshot of your actuals at any point of time, bring it into your budget plan document, and have it as a separate column for comparison and to work with your current budget or forecast. You will ask me, okay, that sounds good enough for financial budgets, right? But actually our company is doing more than that. We really need to do the budget in different areas of the application. And when we are doing budgets, we are doing sales budgets where we are working not with financial dimensions, but with our products and with our customers. And we need to plan not only on the monetary expression, but we need to plan on quantities, how many items we are going to sell. Or you are doing, if you are in professional services, you might be doing projects budgeting, where essentially for your projects you want to define detailed work breakdown structure and be able to track your budget on an hourly basis based on that and track your resources as well. So most of the things that we are going to look at today will be based on ledger budgets, on financial budgets, but keep in mind that Dynamics AX has different capabilities in budgeting in different areas of the application. So I will call out project budgets, where in this module there is special capabilities related around projects, where you can do, as I mentioned, work breakdown structure. You can have a tight integration with Microsoft Project and import, export your budget plans. And you can make forecasts specific for specific project. And once you are done, if you want to include those project budgets into your financial budgets, you can do it simply by using a periodic process and bringing that information to your budget register entry. We do have quite a bit of capabilities in fixed assets module as well. We do have a journal that is called Fixed Asset Budget Journal. In that journal, you can plan any activities that are related to your fixed asset budget. So you can run, again, some periodic process that will calculate for you proposed depreciation for upcoming periods for your fixed asset that you have already got. You can manually add lines in there for acquisitions that you would plan for your fixed assets. And again, all of that information using periodic process, you can bring in either to your budget plan document or budget register entry. The sales budget, the one that I mentioned in the beginning, where I want to do a budget based on my customers, on my item groups, and I want to do a calculation looking backwards, what I was selling before, to calculate that the future periods of time for selected horizon. All of that information, all of that capabilities you can do using the functionality that is available in Dynamics AX, and it's called demand forecasting. There was a session yesterday on demand forecasting. I hope that some of you who had an interest had a chance to attend it. If you haven't had, make sure that you watch the recording after convergence. And finally, workforce budgets makes, again, quite a big part of your overall budget. Your human resources cost usually is pretty heavy load in your budget. So we do have a module that allows you either, if you are using human resources module in general and you have positions and your workers in Dynamics AX, or you are not using human resources module, you still can do position-based budgeting using forecast position functionality. And we will have one demo today specifically related around forecast positions. Okay, so with that, that's probably all from the overview, and that probably all the time that we will are spending from the theoretical perspective, talking about budget. We will get into the demos. We are going to see 4 demos today. So the first one will be just creating annual P&L budget. And it will be a very simple demo where we will take a financial persona who wants to create a budget and leverage Excel capabilities to easily enter his budget numbers into Dynamics AX. And afterwards, we will get to see a little bit about into the capabilities, how high-level management could review those budget amounts and what abilities do we have for reporting. Afterwards, we will build on that simple demo, and we will complicate it a little bit, including there are a couple of levels where we will distribute the budget from our top level, from finance to departments, and afterwards aggregate it back to the finance level. And we will talk a little bit about security that we have and the workflow capabilities. The third demo will be about workforce planning. So that one, we will look into forecast positions, components of forecast positions, and different capabilities that we have over there. And finally, we will take a peek also into budget control and budget transfers functionality that we have in Dynamics AX. So let's start with the first demo, creating annual profit and loss budget. And as I mentioned, it will be a very simple one. So we will, as a financial persona, who is, let's say, Brad, will create a budget that we will use Excel to create the budget, and we will load that budget into Dynamics AX. And afterwards, through the workflow, we will push that budget for CFO review. And we will look how CFO could view into those amounts and how he could make a decision to get the budget approved. So let's get out of PowerPoint and move to Dynamics AX. And let's look into budgeting module. So first thing that we are going to do as financial persona who wants to create a budget in Dynamics AX, we are going to go into all budget plans, budget plan document that I mentioned before, the one that we are using for planning capabilities, and I'm going to create in the list a new document. We do have one there for the previous year, so we are not going to look into that. We will just take a look at the new one. First thing that I'm going to pick is called budget planning process. Budget planning process essentially is a set of rules that you are using to come up for your budget. So budget planning process defines what is your budgeting organization, what workflows are being used, what Excel templates and workbooks are going to be used, what is your budget cycle. All of that information is combined into budget planning process, and system knows how to treat that budget plan based on this information. So we will take annual P&L 2015 that I have configured in advance. And it defaults for us a responsibility center, that in our case is finance, as I'm a finance person, and defaults my name. It knows that by the user I'm logged in with. And yeah, we are just typing in some name for the budget plan, make sure that we can understand what we are creating there, and click button create. So it creates an empty document for us, which essentially a container where we can get the numbers in, okay? And to get those numbers in, we are not going to use Dynamics AX, but we are going to use our beloved tool for budgeting, which is Excel, okay? So we are going to click on the worksheet button, and what it's doing right now, so when I'm clicking on that worksheet button, based on the setup, it knows by budget planning process that I picked, what template I really want to use, how that Excel workbook needs to look like for me, and it will create a physical Excel file, a workbook, that it will store in the predefined location where I want to keep it, and will attach it to this budget plan document. So essentially, Later, I will show you that at any point of time, you see a reference to that specific workbook when you are looking into your budget plan document, and you just click on the link, and anytime you can access this specific workbook related to that document. Let's take a look how this workbook looks like. So one way how you could enter this budget, by the way, to create the template and to create that Dynamics IX related template, it's really a simple thing to do because we do have a wizard in Dynamics IX that helps you to do that. You don't really need to have any technical knowledge. You are just going into the setup, running a wizard which asks you a couple of questions. Okay, what columns do you want? What financial dimensions are you going to use? What amounts are you going to enter? And that's it. It spits out an Excel file for you that you can work on top of that afterwards. You can do things like formula fields, conditional formatting. You can do additional sheets where you will copy-paste some information that you don't keep in AX at all, but just keep locally and want to make sure that it gets included into your budget. And all of that will be saved together with your template and will be available to be used for your budgeting activities. So the table that this wizard is creating looks something like this. In this specific worksheet, I have selected that we will have just main account as our financial dimension, even though I'm using like 6 or 7 financial dimensions in my application, but let's say I'm budgeting just by main account. I could definitely choose a different level. I could choose that I'm budgeting for my cost centers, departments, etc., etc. The desired granularity is what you select. And I do have a set of columns where I can enter amounts. This time, I have a column for previous year actuals, and if Neil would stand over there, you could see that it's actually not editable. So I can define which columns are editable, which are not. Why would I do that? We will show you later that you can bring information like from previous year to your budget plan for reference. So essentially, it makes no sense to edit previous year actuals, right? And I just want to prevent people to do it accidentally or to misinterpret what's in there. So essentially, you can define again as a part of the template what it's editable and what it's read-only. And in this template, I have picked that I'm going to enter amounts on a monthly basis. I have a column per month. Again, it's your desired granularity what you are picking. It can be months, it can be quarter, it can be just one total for the whole year. It can be one total for multiple years if you choose to do so, as you decide. And you can see when I'm entering amounts over there is a total that is being calculated right away. The nice thing about the total is that I still, even though it's calculated based on the monthly amounts, I still can adjust it. So if, for example, I decide that I need to increase the total a little bit, it will let me do that. And what it will do, it will calculate the difference between what was calculated based on the month and what I have entered, and will distribute that difference using weighted average to the columns that I have in my breakdown for the budget. So different capabilities how I can enter those amounts. This table is a IX-bound table, so it means that lookups, like lookup for the main account that I've got, it pulls information from my actual Dynamics IX application, what are main accounts available for my legal entity right now. We do have a tools and ability to validate the financial dimensions combinations that I enter. So in the top level on this workbook, there is Dynamics IX ribbon, where we have some things that we can do specifically about this workbook. So there is a button called Validate Dimensions. So if I would be clicking that one button, what it would do, it would tell me that, like in this case, there is just main account that is picked, and it's not a valid account for this accounting structure. So what it's doing then, it's marking the lines that are invalid based on my setup in Dynamics IX with that exclamation mark, and saying that those lines need to be fixed, and if you hover over, it shows the specific error message that describes to you what exactly is wrong with that line and why what you need to fix in that line to make it right. Okay? So different tools and connectivity to this Dynamics IX that we have there. But I hear a lot of customers saying, okay, but I like to enter my P&L statement not this way, that like I'm entering line by line, right? I do have a fixed table that I want to use, and I do have a fixed elements that I want to have in there, and I just want to fill that table in and to make sure that it gets into Dynamics IX. Can I do that? Yes, you can do that. So what I have in this workbook, essentially, I have added additional sheet, which is a simple Excel table. So it's purely for you how you define it Excel, what items you add in there. The only thing that I have added there, I added their main account for each line where I'm entering amounts to make sure that system knows afterwards what main accounts actually to use when it's bringing that information back to Dynamics AX. So I can fill those amounts in that simple Excel table. And afterwards, what I have done, I have a little macro written, which is called by clicking the button, Prepare Data for Dynamics AX. It's like 3 lines macro, really, nothing complicated. I'm not a developer. I was able just to encode it really quickly by doing the template. And what it does, it gets information from that IX Excel table to that my IX bound table, copies it over there, and the last thing that I need to do to get into Dynamics AX, just to click on the Publish button, which essentially brings all the information that I have in the Excel workbook back into Dynamics AX. So as publishing is complete in our case, that information is available already in Dynamics AX format. As I mentioned, we can add additional sheets to this workbook as well. So if I will add additional sheet, let's say that there is some supplementary information I want to keep around this specific budget plan, and I want to add, let's say, justification why this budget plan needs to be like that, right? Additional breakdown, calculations that are lower than my financial dimensions that I really don't have a place in AX to store, but I still want to have a reference to them. So I can add this as a separate sheet over there, and when I'm closing the workbook, I just can save it, and when it's getting saved, system will know that this information needs to be stored with that specific workbook, and I will be able to access this at any point of time. So Neil is already back in Dynamics AX, showing you the document, so we just refresh the document, and you can see that all those lines he quickly just copy-pasted, and using Excel are back in Dynamics AX using those main accounts that were defined in the table, and information is brought back over. And if we will look into the right pane, there is a budget plan documents tab where you can see the links to those Excel workbooks that have been created as a part of that budget plan preparation. So at any point of time, I can click on that link, and it will go and open that specific workbook that I'm storing in either SharePoint location or network folder, whatever I choose to do so. And you can see that information, that additional information that I have added just as a part of the workbook, like additional sheet, is also being saved, and I can reference to it at any point of time. Okay? So let's go back to Dynamics AX, and let's look at some additional things that we have in this document. So there are also totals displayed. You can see that there is scenario and there is amount by scenario and the budget class, what you are entering over there. There's totals by amounts, and there are also totals by quantities. What does it mean? In a budget plan document, you can have not only monetary things you budget for, but also quantitative things you budget for. So information that you decide you are going to use in your budget plan, you can define if it's monetary or it's quantity-based. And if it's quantity-based, what unit of measures might be used for that. Typical scenarios would be for that, if I'm doing my workforce budget, I might want to budget not only for expense for my workforce, but also for FTE count, full-time employees count, right? And I could easily use budget plan document for that purpose. So both monetary and quantity is available. And finally, you see that yellow ribbon above, which essentially indicates that budget plan document is being ready to be submitted to the workflow, and there are some things that will have to happen with that budget plan. So if I will submit that budget plan to the workflow, what it will do right now, as it's configured to send it to CFO for review, it will just get that document and send it for CFO for review. So CFO, let's try to open a session looking at the CFO. So CFO, when opens his AX and looks into the role center, one thing that usually they can see there, it's a work list where there will be an item for him assigned to take action with. So he will be asked to review that specific document. And we can talk also a little bit about the ways how the information for that CFO could be provided. So first way to do that obviously would be for him to open the same document, to open the workbook that could be already in a different shape than the one that financial person was using to enter the budget, but in the shape that would make sense for that level of manager who is reviewing the budget and the details that are relevant for that specific manager. There are also a couple of other ways how we present that information. There was a lot of talk and a lot of sessions around BI in this conference. How many of you are familiar with Power View capabilities? Okay, I see there are a few hands. I will showcase you a little example. How could you use Power View report to present your budget plan data and use it, let's say, for high-level manager review, analysis, and even presenting in the board meeting for other managers. So in this role center, what we do have prepared, we do have a little chart, budgeted expense by department and main account. So that chart is actually a Power View report, which is prepared based on out-of-the-box budget planning cube that we have in Dynamics IX. So there is a cube that if you are deploying the cubes and updating the cubes, if your system administrator is doing that, on top of that, you can create so-called Power View reports. And it's end user experience how to do that. There is no developer knowledge needed. I created that report myself in 15 minutes. Neil will be a witness. I'm not a developer. I don't know how to do those things. I'm just talking. So this report has multiple charts that are slicing the same information for me in multiple ways. So let's make that report bigger. Let's open it in a separate page in our browser. And let's see what you can do with that report. So you see there are three charts. The first chart is breaking my amounts that I have budgeted for on a monthly basis. The second one is breaking them down by departments. And the third one is breaking them down by main accounts. Those three charts work on the same data, and they are related to each other. So essentially, I can interact with the chart. And let's say I'm thinking, what's that my month 3 amount, and what it's combined of? What information do I have in there? I can click on that specific piece of the chart that I'm interested in, and it will reflect that in the related charts, and will display, for that specific month in this case, what is the breakdown, and what part does it take by my departments and by my main accounts. So I can do that based on any of the charts. If I want to analyze specific department, I can do that. If I want to analyze specific amount, I can do that as well. There is ability to add additional filters in there. And if you hover over, you are able to see a little bit more information as well, like the specific amount that is for that specific element of your chart. So a really nice way how you can work with slice your budget data and how you can analyze it, what you have prepared. The other nice thing about those Power View reports is that you can actually export that Power View report to the PowerPoint right away. So essentially, I can grab this report and I can export it to let's say I'm preparing for the board meeting, right? I just want to include that information from this specific chart to my presentation, PowerPoint presentation, and I want to show it to my board. So what Neil is doing right now, he's exporting that to a PowerPoint. And what system done, it has grabbed that information from that the chart, and it has created a PowerPoint slide for me. If I will open it, that PowerPoint slide, the nicest thing about it, that if you will go to the presentation mode of the slide, and if you will click the button Interact, you see there is a button Interact in the bottom. What it allows you to do, it allows you to interact with that data and slice it right away on the presentation mode. So all of that we've been doing in the browser is available over there as well. So it's a really nice way to present the information to the high-level managers. Okay? So hopefully that our CFO in this demo liked what they saw and got that budget plan approved. So to quickly summarize what we saw in that first demo, we saw ability to use smart Excel templates and to have all the Excel capabilities available for you to prepare your budget, and at the same point of time to avoid that problem of keeping multiple versions of the workbooks, not knowing what's the latest version, and what's my actual budget numbers are, by keeping as a single source of truth Dynamics AX. So you can use Excel to work with the budget numbers, but once you publish, information gets into Dynamics AX, and that's your single source of truth, what your budget is. Templates for those Excel workbooks, as I mentioned, can be created by using a wizard in Dynamics AX. If there is an interest from anybody, and at the end of the presentation, if you will have time magically, we will try to show it, at least to show the few screens where the wizard is and how it runs. Otherwise, feel free to stop by after the presentation and we can show it at a later point of time as well. Excel workbook gets created once we are clicking that worksheet button in budget plan document. And you can have the additional information, not only the stuff that was included into your template, but additional stuff that you were using to prepare your budget numbers. And you can have as many templates as you like. And you can assign a specific template to your budget plan document stage. While it's in the initial stage, let's say it's using one template. When it's in CFO review stage, it's using a different template, and so on. And we also looked at a little bit into capabilities, how we can view budget plan data. And the one way that we looked at was using Power Review reports based on the budget planning queue. I haven't showed you, but keep in mind that there are different other capabilities as well, how we can look into that information. So all budget planning data that you are working with Dynamics AX is available in Management Reporter. So Management Reporter, if you are aware of it, is a tool that you can use for your financial reporting. And you can obviously have actuals information over there. But the same way, you can pull into separate columns your budget information, and you can pull that information directly from your budget plans. And there are a couple of standard reports that are available in budgeting area, so-called SSRS reports, that you also can run, and you can use that information out of the box. Okay, with that, let's move. Yeah, sure.
Do you do the structure, so the budgeting for legal entity or with the business units or the dimension you like?
So those templates that we saw, they are for legal entity. So essentially, budget planning process, the one that we are picking for the rules for the document, is legal entity specific. So you will be defining for that specific legal entity how they are going to do the budgets. You can easily reuse those templates across multiple legal entities. And Neil is going to show in the next demo how you can use org hierarchy, how to define who is participating in the budget. So your budgeting hierarchy might be combined from business units and departments below, or just departments or cost centers, whatever you choose to have as a breakdown of your budget. Does it answer the question? Let's see the demo. Let's see the demo. Go on. Yeah.
Those reports that were showing us, just so I understand, those were all out of management report.
The one that we just saw in the screen, it's not management reporter, that was a Power Review report. So we took a budget planning cube. There is a cube that pulls all the data from Dynamics AX and slices it. And afterwards, you can use a tool which is called Power Review reporting, where you can build those reports and you can pin them to the role centers in Dynamics AX for a specific user.
Okay, so everything else was standard functionality.
Yes, that's all. There were no development activities involved. I just had deployed Q and Power Review tool, and all of them are out of the box. Right? So it's just deployment and designing specific reform that you want. Okay. Let's go on.
All right. So how many of you came here expecting to see that you're actually going to see a presentation in PowerPoint about building slides for PowerPoint for budget planning? That was a little different, but it's always good to see it. We're going to talk about, I guess, the next level of this demo. How many people are in an organization that only has one hierarchical level? None. Exactly. So the demos that we show for the high level, maybe you're having a department do a budget, but it's really important for us to be able to do budgets across across multiple departments and going down through the hierarchy of your business. So the second demo I want to show here is about that. So you can see at the first level here, we've got the finance one. This is what we showed before. You have the annual budget, then you go to the review and the approval. But that's only the highest level, and maybe that's all your CFO cares about. But the devil is in the details. I think we're all aware of that. And so really what we need to do is go actually, once the finance has determined what the prior actuals are, we're going to distribute it down to the individual departments to make those decisions. So I want to talk about a few things we're showing here and talk about the concepts we have about it for budget planning. Sagita mentioned and talked about with the organizational, with the structures. That's a budget planning process. So each thing we're showing here, this is a single budget planning process, and it encompasses 2 levels of hierarchy, the finance and the department. And each number in that node is what we call a responsibility center. You'll notice at the top level, it moves from initial to CFO, review to approved. Those are what we call budget planning stages. So for any given budget plan, it can move through one or more stages. And down at the department one, you can see that we have 2 stages, initial and submitted, from the lower level. So there, it's a much simpler flow, but it also works with, it's customized for that department. And if we actually decide we need to have a very specific multiple stages within a specific department, we can do that as well. Usually I would do that at the workflow level. Say you're purchasing computer hardware, and for those types of budget plans, what you need to do is have your IT department involved, so you may actually have them in your workflow. So you have a different workflow for something when you're depending on what you're purchasing. So at the top level, previous year actuals is probably the most important thing to put in there. And that's something that the budget manager would typically do. Sagita mentioned that we can pull it from a number of different places. We can bring it in from fixed assets, we can bring it from project, we can bring it in from workforce. So really what we're going to show you today on this demo is bringing it in from the general ledger. And at the top level, that's one of the numbers, and then the second one is the annual budget. At the very beginning, Brad really doesn't know what the annual budget is. He's got the actuals. He's going to say, this is what I think the annual budget is going to be. But then once he's got that, he's going to leave it to the departments to actually tweak and customize it, so they're going to ask for their specific things. Maybe they know they need, I don't know, new laptops. Maybe presenters have to have a new one because hers is way too heavy to lug around. I seem to have the small laptop, and she's got this massive thing. It's a good thing she's stronger than I am. And we call those, if you look at the previous year actuals, that's what we call a scenario. So at the very beginning, in the initial stage of the finance, Brad is actually able to edit that previous year actuals. However, at the department level, you can't. It becomes read-only to look at. And maybe there's some, and the annual budget at that point becomes editable, so that because at the department level, they're entering that budget request from that. And we can have far more scenarios we want to look at. When you look at the demo that for the workforce that Sagita will be doing, you'll see that she actually uses 4 different scenarios at once. These are all customizable. They can support quantity. They can support specific units. It's up to you. So what I'm going to show you is really starting at the beginning, going down through that, and before we bring it back to CFO review. So just a subset of that. So let's go to AX. Go have a look. And we're going to start on the generate processes. So on the periodic processes, we have ways to bring in, build out of the product. In this example here, we're going to generate from general ledger. But you'll notice we can bring it in from previous budget plans, project. And we actually also have an AIF. We have a web service. So if you want to bring it in another way, we can do that as well. So really here, we're starting again with what our budget processes we're going to bring in. And Sagita, she can select specific filters, like maybe we only want to bring into some different accounts if we want, using a query that we have, the sys query. And here, pick that if we want to. We're not going to do it for this demo. But one of the neat things you have is on the right there under target, we can pick, are we going to create a new budget plan? Are we going to put it into an existing budget plan? Maybe it's a generate process that we run, say, every quarter. If you've got an example where we have a forecasted amount, and as our budget planning gets closer, we want to sort of replace that forecast with the actual values, then we can actually do that. We can basically keep running a generate process to get our data more and more accurate as we get closer to the new year. We have some generation rules, and you can see on the bottom right there, factor, we have minimum, and some rounding. This lets us, when we come in, we can say that, we only want to bring in data if it's a certain value. If we have a transaction that's $100, we really doesn't care for our main part of our budget when we're doing a large construction project. We care about the large numbers. Rounding, again, maybe your budget is done rounded at 1,000 or maybe the tens of thousands of dollars, so we can actually take all this and round them, so when they come into the system, they're already at that level. So you're not dealing with the pennies, you're dealing with the main larger numbers. You can see at a high level it's going to do that. So Sagita's got that configured, and what we're going to do is going to click Generate, and it's going to take that, and it's going to create that, create a new budget plan for me that I'll be able to enter and work with. And in this instance, I'm acting as Brad, the budget manager. So I'm at the highest level as the organization, and we'll show you that later. And Brad he's the highest level for budget planning. You can have multiple organizational hierarchies in AX, and you specifically say what purpose you're going to be doing it for. So in this case, we're doing it for budget planning. We're going to use a hierarchy that is on the ones we're going to work on. So Sagita's got it already. She has the budget plans been created. We're going to open it up. And if we look at it and we change this, you'll notice that now it is set. We have all the data brought into AX and all the amounts. And it'll have the rounding and truncation as we said. But when you're starting that, you really want to do the next phase is we want to take that information and transition it from the prior year actuals into what the working amounts are going to go with. Because as I said, we don't want the people entering at the department level to be able to change that. So we have this allocation here, and it's something that we can do in workflow, but in this example we're going to do it using the application. And if we click this allocate, it's going to actually bring up a dialog that will let us choose the types of allocation we want to do. So we can do aggregation, which is going to take data. If you have all these budget plans down at a department level, you want to aggregate that information. Or you can do the distribute, which is the opposite, which is taking the information at the level that you're at, say at Brad, and bringing it down to the department. So he wants to split it by department. It'll actually work that based on the dimensions you have in the department. And we're going to look now at we can distribute by period, or we can allocate by function. But what Sagita's really going to do is she's going to do a quick one for us that'll copy the data. So we're going to pick a different scenario, and now we're going to copy the amounts, and we're going to have a factor. So we're going to decide how much more budget is going to be this year than, say, it was last year. And, I can tell you that she's nice. She's going to give us a 12% increase, but obviously sometimes that doesn't happen. Sometimes your budget is cut from the previous year. So just the way it goes, unfortunately. So now we go there, and we click Allocate, and what it's done is it's taken all the selected lines, and it's created a new scenario with new amounts. So, and if we look on the right-hand side, with what Sagita showed before, we can see that we have new scenario amounts, and we've got it by expense and by revenue, which is the budget class, and got those amounts there. So it's kind of been updated and gone for that. So when I talked about distributing it down to departments, that's something that if you have a lot of departments, takes a lot of time. If you have multiple levels in your hierarchy, it gets even worse. And the very first time I did this for the budgeting for MBS, Microsoft's Business Division, we had 5 levels of hierarchy. And I was not about to distribute, because I was acting as the budget manager at the time, to distribute it down and down and down and down and down again. So we have an automated workflow that will do that for us. So in this case, Sagita is going to click Submit. She's going to approve this, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to generate and run it through there. Now, while the system is running in the background and workflow is chugging along, I want to switch over to the budget planning process so we can take a look. So the budget planning process, it's the placeholder. It tells us all the rules of the types of budget we're working on. You can see that here we've got 4 different budget planning processes that, in our case, we're working on the, I think, 2000 and Workforce 1. So what we can do on one of the top buttons is view the hierarchy. So she clicks on this, and it's going to open up the hierarchy in the hierarchy viewer. Have people seen the hierarchy viewer before? Familiar with it? A number of nods, a number of no's. So this gives us an overall view that you can go up and down on and look at your organization and see what it's like. Obviously very useful when you're in the HR side. But for us, you can see that we've got the finance at the top level and then other departments at the bottom level. And it can go down multiple levels. We just don't want to complicate it with all these other areas of doing that. And we can look at summarized information from that level as well. So the fact boxes on the right-hand side show us that detail. And also shows us the status of a plan. You can choose to have multiple plans. In this per Department Responsibility Center, but in our demo here, we only have one for each one. And you can see all the amounts that are passed down. So also, if you go back to the process, you can see that we've got a few other areas I'd like to look at. The administration part you've got here tells us what what responsibility at center, what workflow we're going to use, and as I said, we can have different workflows depending on what department you're working on and obviously at what level. The workflow that goes through the CFO is very different than the workflow goes at the individual department. So in our case, we can see here that we've got, they're all department type workflows, but we have the auto-approve ones that we've just set up for the demo, and we've got a few manual ones that we have to approve. Below that, we've got for each budget planning stage, and does everyone remember we had the stages that it went through? For each one, we can determine what you can do. So we can say whether you can edit it right now, whether you can associate plans at a lower level, and also it tells us what template we're going to use. So you'll notice that the templates that we open and we work with at, say, at this level are going to be different than the templates that we worked with on, say, the previous demo, because you have different information coming in. If, say, I'm entering information and I'm the budget manager, I may not be worrying about it by month, or maybe I am, but the CFO may not care. Department level, they want to see it fully split out, but the CFO, again, he may really want to see it only by department. It all depends how we want to look, so we can customize and create multiple templates, or we can reuse the same template if we want. Okay, so it's already done by now, so let's go back and have a look at the budget plans. And you'll notice that it has created a whole pile of budget plans automatically for us, and they're assigned to the people who need to work on them. So you can see here that we've got a number that are auto-approved, but we've got one assigned to Molly there in operations, and that one's not done yet. So it's in department review, and Molly has to go do something. And so let's go and pretend we're Molly now. And we're going to log on to Molly. And Molly has a little different. Molly is not an AX user. She basically only uses, say, the enterprise portal. She'll use employee self-service and things like that. So we're opening it up here, and we're going to go and log on as Molly. And she's clicked on the budgeting tab. So in this case, all of the things like workflow and approval can all be anything that can be done in AX. On the main client can be done here. The big difference is you cannot do the budget manager activities. All the configuration has to be done in the main client, which makes sense because that's something Brad's going to live in a lot more. So Molly, you can see she's got the same view of the created budget plan. It has all the amounts that are associated with her department alone. You can see on the right it's got the fact boxes. She can click on Excel and she can view it in the worksheet as well. And we can also, at the end, of course, when she's done, she can click Submit and go through from there. So she can just complete it, approve it, and then it'll go through. And at that point afterwards, and I'm not going to go and show you right today, but we would then aggregate it, which would be another workflow step to bring the data back in. So now we've brought all the information in. We're ready to go on the next level. And usually what happens is once all the departments have done and entered what they are requesting for, typically that's probably not what they're going to get. Their budget, what's going to happen is the budget manager and working with the CFO, they'll make the decisions on the actual amounts assigned. So that's pretty well all I wanted to show right now for this. I think we'll just hop back to a little wrap-up about it. So I just showed you one way to import data in, and that was a periodic process based on the general ledger. And at the very beginning, Sagita mentioned that we have there's fixed asset budgeting, there's project budgeting, there's forecast positions. We have other ways we can bring the data in directly. If you have a third-party system, you want to bring it in, you can use our web service, which will bring that information in. And that's the same web service we use for exporting it to Excel. And also, of course, Excel is one of the main ways to enter it in, be it like the example that Sagita had, where you had it on a different tab and you used the macros to populate it in, an extra validation there. So, and then the other one we can do it is these are available for the data migration framework, so you're able to use all those use their data entities to bring the information in. We did budget adjustment. When we did the periodic processes, we did some rounding. We can choose to exclude smaller amounts. And then we can also do adjustments based on what we did in allocations the same way, where we can choose to say, in that case, we usually have an allocation factor. We can assign to different periods, things like that. And then, of course, in Excel, we can go and we can do the manipulation there. You can choose to have totals. You can have some formulas where you want to put your information in automatically. And then I guess the last piece I showed a lot about the budgeting organization. We showed that we had at the top was the budget manager, and below that we had the individual departments. Now, one of the things we have is the information is secure by based on our organization. And I don't know if you noticed or not, and I forgot to mention, but when Molly opened it, how many plans did Molly see? Budget plans. There was just one, correct. However, you'll notice that Brad, the budget manager, saw a whole pile of them. Well, that's because Brad is in a different role and a different place in the hierarchy. Because at the top level, you can always see the amount below you. Obviously, a lot of concern about security, specifically when we're doing workforce. And we actually introduced a different way to do this for CU8 for 2012 R3. So by default, and this is the configuration, we do security by worker position, and that's a user is assigned to a worker. A worker is in one or more positions, and those positions are assigned to departments. So if someone is in a shared place, perhaps an administrative assistant, and they're on different departments, and say they're helping with the budget, that's an often thing they do, they'll be able to see all those departments' budgets and work through those and manipulate those. But what if you are somebody who you don't want to go in at that level, or you're not using our HR system? What you can then do is use our security organizations. It's a new request we got in based on a customer, and we're always happy to respond to your feedback and do as much as we can. And actually then we're using a slightly different model, which is the straight to the user role. And how many are familiar with setting up security in AX 2012? Got a number of people. Have you done security at the user role level? You have? Okay. So basically, I mentioned earlier that that organizational hierarchy we showed was associated for budget planning. But you can also obviously create hierarchies for security. So assuming that you have a hierarchy for security, then we can go ahead and budget planning, we can use that double purpose hierarchy to configure which people can see that based on that department. So how are we doing for time? Do we want to show that, or?
You've got no time. No time.
We've got no time. Sikita talks too much. All right, so I'll wrap that up for now, and afterwards, if you want to see it, just let us know. We can walk you through and how to configure it. It's very simple. Be aware it does work at the level for your legal entity.
Can I have one more?
Just one. You can ask the other one later.
When you do this scenario with the back-control input, can you actually do certain input to the budget centrally increase for the input and adjustment within the departments?
Yes. Yes. Well, what I would do then is I would have you could do that at the workflow level as you move through the stages. You can lock down those amounts. And for this demo, we have a simple scenario where you basically push down that amount, and then that's the one they enter. In our case, we actually had a target budget, and then we had a requested budget. So you have a lot of control over that. And when it came back up again, the other thing you really didn't want to do is you didn't actually want the person at the next level up to tweak your numbers. You wanted them to make a different decision, because you'll say, well, wait a sec, I asked for $10,000, why are you giving me $6,000? And you want to have a report of that, because obviously they've made a decision based on other things not to cut it. So yes, there's actually a lot of ability to lock down. We call that scenario constraints. So I'm going to hand it back to Sagita with our next demo.
Okay, our third demo we are going to look at is forecast positions demo. So we will take an example where we are going to do workforce budget for one of the departments in our company, and we will look into developing two separate scenarios, two versions of that budget, just to compare those amounts and understand what would be the impact on different business decisions. We will have one scenario where we will look into adding additional benefits for all the employees in that department. And let's say we are thinking about introducing additional dental insurance, and we want to see what would be the cost if we would introduce that to all of our planned forecast positions. And we will develop another version of the same budget where we will look what would happen if alternatively, not introducing those additional dental benefits, we would use some money and hire some additional employees for specific positions in that department. Okay? So let's quickly switch to IX, and let's take a look how it can be achieved and how we can do that. So we will go to Human Resources module first, where we have a tab for forecast positions. As I mentioned before, you can use those forecast positions independently if you are using Human Resources module in general in IX, or you are not using it, you are using some third-party software, you could still be able to bring that information into forecast positions and have it there. If you are using your Human Resources module, that's even better, because you can, at any point of time, simply take a snapshot of your actual positions to your forecast positions and develop budget based on that. Okay? And what you do here in forecast positions, it's your sandbox. It doesn't affect your actual positions. And it lets you just to play those numbers, as I said, to develop different scenarios and to understand what might happen. So for now, it's empty. I don't have any forecast positions created yet. So what I will do, I will click on the button, forecast position, new forecast position. And there are, as I mentioned, multiple options how you can create them. So this time, I will just, as I have them in actual positions, I will just grab a snapshot of my actual positions. And based on that, we'll create those forecast positions. For the first scenario, remember I mentioned that in our business case, what we are going to do, we are going to develop a scenario. What would happen if I'm going to introduce some additional benefits for those positions? So I will take scenario benefits increase that I have configured to use for this purpose. And other thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to filter out those positions, let's say just to operations department. I'm not going to do it for all the departments this time, just for operations department. So you'll filter that out. And we will grab all of those positions that depends to operations department, and we will bring them into forecast positions. So what system is doing it right now, it took a snapshot of my actual positions that I have already in human resources module, and based on that, it created those forecast positions to be used specifically for that scenario purpose, benefits increase purpose. Let's open one of the positions and let's take a look what information is available there. So obviously, in the top, there are general standard things that we are tracking. So we do have a position name. We do have a description. We do have what department it depends to whom it reports. We do have if it's a full-time employee or it would be part-time employee as well. And that position can be occupied by somebody. Somebody might be working there as a worker, or it might be empty as well. So it might be not filled at this point of time. Another thing that might be important to take a look at is financial dimensions. So in this tab, we have default financial dimensions for this specific position. So we know that this position is depending to Department of Operations and Cost Center of Logistics. There is a little button which is called distribution template over there. Well, what does it mean? Quite often you will want to divide the cost of your, let's say, administrative employees to multiple financial dimensions to spread it, across the cost centers. Let's say there is some finance person who's earning a salary, but he is doing a job for all the company, so you want that cost to be spread out. So you can do that spread using so-called distribution templates. And when that cost will be calculated for that specific forecast position, it will know, let's say, that 40% of that position cost needs to go to the cost center A, and another 60 to cost center B. Okay? So there are the ways how you can do that. And finally, there is a tab where are listed so-called budget cost elements. Budget cost elements are essentially all the items that makes up the cost of your forecast position. And they might be really salary-related things. Obviously, you will have here the base pay. You will have some budget for taxes. You will have benefits. You can go as detailed as you want or as summarized as you want over there. It's all configurable. You are picking what type of benefits and budget cost elements you are going to track. And you can, let's take a look at one of those, and we can discuss what else can be done there. So if you will look how budget cost elements are being defined, you can see in the top that there is one for taxes in this case, and budget cost type is set to tax. There are other budget cost types, as I mentioned, that could be earnings, benefits, and so on. So for each of those budget cost elements, you can define if you will allow changes to that amount of budget cost element for specific position or not. So it makes sense to allow changes for things like bonuses, right? Where I might, I have some standard, but I might plan to give some bonus to some person, but not give to another person. But when it comes to taxes, it really, I cannot choose whom I'm paying taxes for, so it makes no sense to allow to change that. So you have control over this. And for each legal entity, you are defining how that budget cost elements will be calculated. Notice that it's date effective, so essentially you are defining for specific dates what rules are valid for this specific budget cost element. So we are picking main account of where exactly this cost is going to go to. And it can be either a % of something else, like in this case, taxes are defined as 5% of calculation basis that you can see below, and that's all base pay types. So I'm just taking 5% of my base pay. So that's a simple example. You could go and do it the way that makes sense for you. Alternatively, you can define budget cost element as annual amount. So instead of saying that it's a percentage, you can say, okay, for this one, we are going to have, let's say, $4,000 as in this example. And what else you can set, if that would be a percentage, you could set an annual limit. So let's say if we are talking about bonuses, you could plan that it will be like 5% of the base pay, but not more than $10,000 or something like that, okay, to put a cap. So in this case, it is set as a simple annual amount. So as we are already on that group dental insurance that is being defined, let's get and add this group dental insurance to all of the forecast positions that we have created in the previous step. So I'm clicking the button Add to Positions and grabbing all the positions that we have for the benefits increase scenario. And we'll select those. You could do obviously selectively, just to add that for some certain positions that would be some certain specific worker types, or you can add it to everybody in there. And we are clicking on the button Assign. And what it does, it goes through each of those forecast positions, and adds that new dental insurance that we have just assigned. So if you will refresh this form that we looked before, so before that, remember, there was just some benefits, taxes, and base pay. And here, dental insurance appears, like an example for that employee, which is $4,000 of the budget amount. And you can see in the source column, it also indicates that it was added manually. So it means not through the initial creation process as a part of the basic package, but something that I have added as a part of developing specific plan for those forecast positions. So this way, you can work with your forecast positions and you can get that plan developed. We'll go back to the list right now, and we will develop a second version of those forecast positions. And the second scenario that we've been talking about, okay, what if alternatively I will take for that department and will hire a few additional employees that I haven't planned for before. So Neil right now is, again, repeating the same exercise that we did before, but in scenarios, he's picking not benefits increase scenario, but expected growth scenario that will get us a different set of those forecast positions. And again, grabbing everything for operations and selecting this. So system will create another version of the forecast position that will be specifically for this purpose. If we will refresh the screen, you can see that right now each title, each forecast position got a new set. So there is one line for benefits increase scenario and another one for expected growth scenario. And what I can do right now, I can grab, let's hire some warehouse workers, Neil.
Oh, I grabbed the wrong process here. Give me a sec. Didn't I?
Would it be so? Okay,
Yeah.
let's create a new set then. So what Neil actually did, he grabbed annual P&L instead of the workforce planning. So you definitely want the set of positions for workforce planning instead. Just operations, please. Okay. That's okay. We can have as many sets as we like. There are no limit. You can develop as many versions of those forecast positions as you like. So right now, if we will look, we will have workforce planning benefits increase and workforce planning expected growth. So we'll grab that expected growth scenario, and let's hire a couple additional warehouse workers. So Neil will have selected position we are interested in, selected copy selected forecast position, and he will just indicate how many do we want to hire. Let's say 5. That will have exactly identical cost as the one that we already got. And we can pick to copy, obviously, financial dimensions, relationship, that it will be hired for reporting to the same person as a person that currently reports to. And we can get those assigned. So you can see that there are like 5 additional warehouse employees added for this purpose. Okay, so that way, at least you've got a little of idea, how you can work with that information. There is a lot of capabilities like compensation grids that you can assign in different ways, how you calculating the base pay based on the steps and increases, and so on. A lot of things in there. Take a look when you will have time if you are really interested. We will move on and we will just look how you can grab all that detailed information for your forecast positions, bring it to your budget plan, and look that in the aggregated financial view and compare those scenarios one to each other to see, okay, what happens, with my money in this version and what happens in this version. So we went back to the budget planning area, and we will create a new budget plan that this time will be for workforce budget planning. Again, we will pick the budget planning process that will be for the workforce, and we'll indicate something for the name for that budget plan. Again, you could push that through multiple levels of the org hierarchy if you would need to, if you want like department heads to be involved into workforce planning of them for those very specific department, or you can keep it isolated that human resources people are just developing that version of the budget. All of that is available in there. So we have a new budget plan, and we have a button you can see, select forecast positions, that lets you to bring the information from that forecast position that we've been looking just before into your budget plan. So we will grab the first set, which is benefits increase scenario, and we will grab all of those positions and we'll say that we want to include them into our budget plan document. And Neil will pick here also full-time employee scenario. It's optional. You can do that. You don't necessarily need to do that. But you can track not only monetary expression of your workforce budget, but also FTE count. So in this case, we say that we want the snapshot of that FTE count to be included into our scenario as well. So we will generate that information into our budget plan. It will get added. So once it gets added, we just need probably to refresh. You can see that the lines on the financial level added right now to the budget plan. So all of that information that I had in my budget cost elements, and where there was, forecast position has a set of financial dimensions associated with it, and it had budget cost element had a main account. For all of those combinations, we get lines included into budget plan document that lets you to analyze that information on financial level. At the same time, we are keeping relationship to that source forecast position that created each of the lines. So you really can reference and at any point of time get back to that forecast position that actually caused that line to be created into the budget plan. So all the tracking is available. So we will quickly get another set that we had one more scenario that we want to include over there, and expected growth. And Neil will repeat exactly the same thing. He will just grab all the positions that we had for expected growth scenario, and we will also grab an FTE count and include that into a different bucket. So those scenarios, you saw that I do have configured right now expected growth, and I do have benefits increase, and I do have separate scenarios for FTE count. It's all configurable by the user. So essentially, you are defining how many scenarios for each of the processes you will want to have and what information you want to see there. So we've got both scenarios right now copied. You can see that there are totals both by amount and by units available in the total section. We can also look at that information in Excel. So if you will click on the worksheet button, for this process, just for fun, we have created another Excel template that just summarizes that information on the financial level and compares those two scenarios one to each other, both monetary and both for the FTE count, and lets you to make right business decisions based on that. So the one that you are going to see that is going to be opened in Excel will be very summarized. It will be just totals by main account and totals by scenario. But definitely you could include more information in there, and you could bring in, if you like, also detailed information about each of the forecast positions that were part of the plan. So over there, just total, what are my expense accounts, and what are amounts by each of the scenarios, and what's the variance between those, and what are my, and a little separate table, what is my FTE count for each of the scenarios. Okay? So that summarizes the second demo. Let's do a quick time check.
20 minutes
Huh?
total. 20 minutes total.
Very good.
Including Q&A.
So we have some time to summarize this demo and to some time for the last one that I really want to save. A little bit of time for this. So what we saw in this demo, we saw ability to create multiple versions of forecast positions. And I mentioned you can have unlimited number of scenarios you want to develop in parallel for your workforce. And you can have unlimited number of your budget cost elements to define what's the basis for your forecast positions. And when you are thinking about how to develop those budget cost elements, what to include in there, you might think to include not only the cost that is directly related to forecast position, but things that causes for you to spend more keeping a person even though it's not directly related to a person. Let's say training costs, right? More employees I have, most likely more of them I want to train. So you could track this type of cost as well as a part of your forecast position. And you can use periodic processes to bring in information from those forecast positions to the budget plans and look at that information in the aggregated level, and again, leverage all the Excel capabilities to develop the final version of your forecast position plan. Okay, let's move to the last demo, which is about the money, budget control. So what if I miss some money? So we'll look at the scenario here where I will be a purchasing agent, a person who wants to purchase some things, and I'm entering a purchase order, and to my big grief, I see that I don't have a budget for this anymore left. So system notifies me that I don't have a budget, and we will explore different ways how I can understand what actually I have got and what can I do to get those budget funds that I need for my purchase order. So let's move back to AX. And let's go to the purchase order. How many of you are, I believe like half of the room will be familiar with purchase orders. Can you show the hands? How many? Okay, yeah, that's about right. So we will not spend time, explaining how purchase order is being entered. We do have entered one already with one line over there. We are trying to purchase something, so Neil will open that document. Okay, so there is a purchase order where we want to have some advertising done, and we do have budget control enabled that controls how much do you spend on that advertising. Okay, so once I, as a purchasing agent, trying to confirm that order, that it would move forward into the process, and clicking on button confirm, what system does, it says, oh yeah, there is an error. Actually, you don't have budget funds available to be able to do that. And it provides the details, what financial dimension value, and by what amount is exceeding those budget funds. So it could be an error, or it could be a warning. It's up to you to decide when you are configuring the system, and keep in mind that there is a lot of flexibility there. So you can configure, we will look at the configuration in a little bit more detail soon, but what you can configure that I'm as a purchasing agent, I'm getting an error when I'm trying to confirm this order, but there will be some supervisor who has power to spend over the budget. If he will come in as his user and will try to confirm the order, it will still show the warning that, okay, you're exceeding budget funds, but it will allow you to proceed. So that control can be both hard and soft. It can just remind people that they are getting over the budget, but still let them enter those purchase orders. So this time, we have a hard stop. How can we look into more details? Okay, what I'm really actually missing? What budget have I got? We will go into financials button over there related to that line. And there is a form which is called budget check errors, warnings, and errors and warnings. So essentially, this check shows, again, the same information was, in the error message that was saying that I'm missing those budget funds. And it's showing information how much I'm over the budget and how much I'm over the budget threshold. So you can also set up so-called threshold. So you can say that users will be getting notified when they are starting to exceed, let's say, 80% of their budget or 70% of the budget. You don't want to surprise them just at the moment they already spent everything. You want to get them warned already at the moment they are exceeding the threshold. And that's, again, something that can be configured. And in this case, we can see, okay, there is amount over the budget 1,000 and over budget threshold 1,200. There is also a tab for budget groups. So let me a little bit explain that. You could also configure this. So budget group, like additional ability to pool your budget funds. So let's say each of your departments or each of your business units has their own budget that they are allowed to spend. And let's say there is a total expense for Department A, which is, I don't know, $100,000. That is the expense budget for current year. So inside of that budget, there is a details for the budget for each expense category. Let's say main account, they're spending this much. You can spend on flights. This much you have budgeted for your, I don't know, bonuses and stuff like that. But by budget group, you are getting a flexibility to spend over inside of those categories and just to be warned if you are overspending, but still to be able to get over up until you reach the limit for the whole business unit or department you are in. So that business unit or department budget pool would be called a budget group. So there would be like 2 levels of budget check. On the first level, it would just warn you and say, okay, you are exceeding your bonuses, but you still have a budget on the whole group level, so you are okay to proceed. And you can be prevented from posting already on the budget group level. So there are 2 shortcuts that you can take a look in more detail. So there is just, how much I'm over the budget for that specific purchase order line. If I will go to budget control statistics form from here, and I will pick my budget cycle, which is 2015, I can see more details in the breakdown for that specific financial dimension combination that caused an error, how much budget funds I'm actually got. So, okay, so here it is. So budget funds available for January 2015 for that specific financial dimension combination is $2,000. And I was trying to enter expense for $3,000. That was causing that error that I'm over budget by $1,000. So that lets me understand, how much budget funds I have. And I have more detailed breakdown. Okay, what's my original budget? What's my revised budget after, let's say, I've got some budget transfers from somewhere else or budget revisions that happened over the year? And what are my actual expenditures that I posted so far? And reservations for current purchase orders or reservations for purchase requisitions and so on. So, and there are also buttons and very detailed information for each of those columns where you can drill into the details and see what were those actual expenditures, what was that revised budget, and so on and so on. You can get into the details of each of the document. So let's flip the view, and I am a purchasing agent. I know we had the budget around there, and we probably had that budget not for advertising, but for selling expense. Let's take a look what I've got for selling expense this time.
We got money.
We've got $10,000 in selling expense. So we might be able to use those funds to proceed with the purchase order that we got for advertising expense, if we choose to do so and we are allowed to do so. So let's go back from this form. There is one more form that I really wanted to show you quick, which is called budget control configuration, which actually defines all the rules that I've been talking about and the flexibility that you got, what you can configure and how your budget control will behave. I will just highlight a couple of things over there. As I mentioned, you can set the desired financial dimensions you're going to control on. So let's say you are budgeting in very, very details by main accounts, departments, expense purposes, resources, workers, whatever you like, very detailed. When it comes to budget control, you really are interested, let's say, just in 2, which is, let's say, main account and that department, right? And all the rest is important information, but I want budget control to be triggered only on that accumulated level. So you can define over there what is actually your dimensions that you're going to control budget for. If we will look into budget funds available tab, we will see actually all the calculation formula. That's, again, it's you who are defining how those budget funds available will be calculated. What documents needs to be included for adding, what documents needs to be included to subtracting from budget funds available. So we've got full control over that as well. If we will look at the source documents, you can also pick what type of documents participate in budget control. Let's say you want to enforce that on purchase orders, but you really don't want for a person who is entering journals to be, messing up this budget control, and you just want to let them to proceed because what you are carrying, let's say, that procure to pay cycle. So here you can define what documents will be included into budget control. and how budget check will be triggered. So it can be triggered on the header level, on the line level. So that purchase order that we had, Neil was clicking confirm button when he got an error saying that he doesn't have those budget funds. You can do it the way that user would be warned on the line level when he just entering that specific line already, he would be notified that he doesn't have those budget funds. Not until he developed a 200 lines purchase order and he realizes that he cannot proceed with that. So he can be warned right away. So up to you to decide. Also, we do have over budget permissions tab, if you will look really quickly into that one above. So here you are defining the user groups that who will be able to go over budget. So you can create a user group or budget managers who, even though your budget funds are exceeded, still can go on and confirm and move on with that expense and go over the budget amounts. So here you would be able to pick those users who would be able to do that. Okay? So if you will go back to our scenario, and we'll try to proceed with this purchase order, what can we do? So we've got those amounts in selling expense that we could transfer and use for our advertising expense. So we are going to create a budget transfer that will transfer those budget amounts from one financial dimension combination to another and will let us to proceed with this specific purchase order. So we will click on transfer document, transfer budget, and we will create a new budget transfer. So essentially, we will just quickly fill in the information that we have. So here is our budget cycle and financial dimension where I want to get budget funds to. So let's say I'm needing those money for our selling expense, advertising expense, and I need, let's say, not 10,000 but 15,000. I know there is something else coming in, and I need an additional couple hundreds for this specific financial dimension combination. And I can identify over there where from I'm going to grab that information. So let's say, in this case, I'm grabbing that information from my selling expense. And I will grab exactly the same 1,500. I could grab it from multiple categories if I would like. And once Neil will be done with entering that, he will just click Update Budget Balances. That will update my budget and will let me to proceed. Again, it's configurable. And you can define budget transfer rules and to define what is allowed to be transferred, what is not allowed to be transferred. So you might allow to transfer inside of, let's say, department and business unit, as long as it's the budget that you are owner of. But you might prevent from transferring and ask additional approvals through the workflow or budget manager if somebody wants to ask budget funds from somewhere else that are really not assigned to them right now. So again, we do have budget transfer rules that allows you to control that. So this time, we already got the transfer that happened. So if we will go and try to confirm that purchase order again, let's see what happens now. You can see there is a nice green check mark next to the line, which actually indicates that budget check has passed successfully, and we do have that purchase order confirmed, and it's available right now for invoicing. Okay, so a lot of capabilities in budget control. If we will go back to the slides, and we'll do a really quick summary what we just saw. So as I mentioned, you can use budget transfer rules to define what allowed to be transferred between financial dimension combination and what needs to go through the workflow and additional people approval to be able to do that. Keep in mind that budget control that you might want to turn on, you might do just soft budget checks. And a lot of organizations really are not up to doing, hard budget checks. But it's a good way to remind people of sensitive expense that they're working in if they are going over the budget. And having those warnings popping up and showing that they are going over the budget just to increase their awareness, what they are doing with the procurements. And finally, we looked at budget control statistic form. We haven't had time to go to another form, which is budget analysis form. You can look it up. If you're in public sector, there is additional form where you can look at the details of your budget funds available in another view. But definitely leverage those forms, and we do also have out-of-the-box budget control cube that you can use to analyze your budget funds available. Okay, so with that, we are all set with the demos.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Now for the next 2 hours of our presentation, where we'll do the detailed code analysis of everything that's been written, or not. I do want to say that we ran a little long today, and our question time is shorter. I apologize for that. We do have on tomorrow at 3:30, we have a roundtable on budgeting for your organization, and we'd love to have you come if you're still here in town before you fly home to wherever you came from. Is there actually anybody here from Atlanta? One person, three. Oh, okay, that's pretty good. So a small percentage, but it's got one of the best airports you can get to, so that helps a lot. We showed you a lot today. I don't expect, obviously, you all to see it, but it's not just to give you a flavor, a feel for what we've got. All the user front ends we have the AX client, we have Enterprise Portal, so you don't have to have the full client installed to use it. And of course, Excel, the ability to create a template and customize it based on your organization and show different Excels at different times. The big strength we have is that I think that the central database of all the budget information is stored in AX, in data, so you don't deal with that problem of the fact that, well, I updated my budget spreadsheet. Didn't you get the version 27 that I emailed you at Sunday night? And you're like, no, because we run the budget final things on Saturday. You don't get that anymore. So a lot of control from there. You have the cubes to do all the analysis, and Sagita showed the fact that we have the power view and all that ability to see from there. We went through again the information from planning goes directly in, can go into the budget register to control your budget or just report on it if that's all you need. And then all the ways you can get the data into it. We've talked about lots of ways to come in, customized ones from third-party systems, or of course to generate ones from other parts of AX as well. So a lot we showed, database reporting. So I'd like to at this point just thank you for coming. Please tell others about what you've got and give feedback. We'd love to hear what you think about our presentations and what information you want to know more about. And for now, let's just open it up if there's any questions. Yes?
So if we talked about security, additional security model that we introduced just in CU8. That's probably the major feature that has changed between CU7 and CU8.
No, we have CU6 and R2.
Okay. CU6, well, most of the capabilities are in there. You might have a little bit different Excel experience inside of Excel. There's a little bit more limitations over there. There were some changes that happened in CU7, but most of the functionality, like workflows, budget plans, budget register entries, everything around budget control is in there and available.
Position forecasting?
What about the forecast positions?
Forecast positions as well.
I think there's some additions to forecast positions in the latest version.
Yeah.
And I didn't show it. We can't show it now, but actually the next CU will be having a few more, which is just a few more better ways to import some data in and a little more detail there as well. So if you can move to R3, CU8, it would be better. Yes?
I'm new to AX, so we're setting up our budget soon.
Mm-hmm.
You had prior year actuals.
Correct.
How does that flow through? And did it come from the financial?
It came from our financial system, but if you want to bring in data directly and just have a scenario called prior year actuals from your third-party system, that's not a problem at all. I would just create a worksheet. I would have a stage which says import from prior year, and I would just put it in Excel or use it and bring it in.
But moving forward, if we had all our...
You would be able to run it there every time, yeah. You can pick what year. We don't show it well, but we're bringing prior year from 2 years ago, not from the current prior year. Yes?
What are the capabilities for the cost center auditors to review the budget versus actuals?
So the question is, what is the capability for the cost center
Owners.
to review budget versus actuals? So we looked at those Power View reports, right, that can be pinned to the role center. So you could, based on that budget planning cube that has all the information, you can create the versions of the report for the cost center level and get that and pin them to the cost center manager role center and get that information available in there.
Basically, any type of data I can use, the monthly data, the yearly data.
Yeah, so it depends on the report, how you define the report, and definitely, yeah, I would be able to look at that.
And this has to use the AX license, so this could be on these...
Power View has its own licensing that you probably need to look at. As a tool, Power View has its own licensing. Obviously, you would need, SQL and, stuff like that. Also, take a look at Management Reporter if you plan to use that for your financial reporting, because Management Reporter also has ability like to generate and send out reports through the organization that you have defined. So that might be also a good way just to send cost center managers the part of the budget that they've got for that.
And the similar capabilities that we have in terms of which data can be used for.
For the XDS policies, not on the cube, there are some limitations with it, what can be used. So you probably would need to limit that through the report itself and through the filters, what you show for each of the cost center managers.
Certainly, I would not be able to drill down to the transaction level in this case.
For
Well, the cube data has almost all the transactional level data down there.
Yeah.
You should be able to pull all the way down to it. Management Reporter, definitely.
Management Reporter is not using a cube. So Management Reporter has its own data warehouse where they're pulling information directly from IX, and they have drill-in capabilities. So in budget versus actual report, you can right-click and you can get into the specific voucher that your actuals are combined off and get to the source documents.
And all
So
the
there.
security measures can be applied to the Power View or Management Reporter as well.
Well,
Just the fact that I cannot see anyone else.
I will be cautious on Management Reporter about using XDS policy over there. So I would defer the question for later. If you will give me a business card, I could come back with more specific answer, because I would need to check with Management Reporter people if they have it.
And they have a booth too. So
Yeah.
if you want to go to the booth in the expo just for Management Reporter, so in terms of that security, they can help you a lot with those details.
Yeah.
Couple more?
I think on Monday I was watching one demo for Dynamics case in the public sector.
Yep.
So the use case was that they have two types of budgets. They have the operating budget and then they have the program budget. And they said they could not match both because A doesn't give the capability. I was astonished why they could not do. They said this is the way the system works. And I stayed like I did today, and to know better, because I was confused about what they said. And I said the way they were going, like the way they're doing the implementation, they have hurdles along the way.
So,
I'm taking this opportunity to raise this concern with you and know if it is true.
So I definitely want to know more about that scenario that I'm really not aware of what exactly they've been demoing over there. And yeah, so we probably want to stay after and clarify what exactly they meant. Yeah, okay. From out of the blue, really, I have no idea what could be that limitation that would be causing me. There might be something, but we should look at the scenario.
So they do budget the program out of like a group project, and then for each project, the naming convention is weird because they name the project instead of having like internal projects, like they create the project type internal. They name the project internal, and it's the way they track the project instead of having this
Using the internal type.
Internal type. Okay.
Okay. Yeah,
So-
just talk to us afterwards.
Yeah,
We'll
okay.
be glad to talk about it.
What about the performance to import from Excel? Because we have what we budget, forecasting, and we have experienced so lowly when about 20,000 rows Excel.
Okay. So what version are you in, first of all?
We are using cumulative 5.
Okay. Okay. So there were significant performance improvements happening after CU7 release. So if you are having performance problems, what I would advise you to do to go through support channel and to ask if they could provide you a hotfix for that specific cumulative update that you've got. They might, they might be able to upgrade you because there were, quite a bit of work done around performance in that area after CU7. And yeah, definitely there are limitations, what we can have in Excel, and obviously it costs some time to load the data and manipulate the data in Excel. What we've been looking at, we really should be able to handle up to 200,000 lines in the Excel workbook, and that's quite a bit. Yeah, it takes a bit of time to develop that level of
What
budget.
about extensible data security? Is enabled for this?
Sorry?
XDS you're talking?
Extensible data security is enabled for this?
Yes, yes it is. Yeah, we use it based on the organization or based on, we showed the two different security models. The newer one that we had for CU8, which was the role-based security, that'll also use XDS as well. It'll use one or the other. That came out of the box. The initial version did have XDS built in. Any other questions?
Have certain strategy how it's going to be developed
Long term?
long term, yeah.
Oh,
The answer is yes, we do.
we do, and we have continuing investment and a lot of plans for the B next of IX, what we are doing with the budgeting module over there. Obviously, we need to hold off up until the summertime when we will be allowed to show the previews of that functionality that we'll have.
Any kind of functionalities that you schedule to implement this year, next year, year after, or
Yeah, so going, for each version that we are working on right now, we are working on the version which is called IX7. If you have been yesterday morning to the roadmap session with Dan Brown and Sri Srivansan, they might be showing some peek to that. So for each of the version, we do have a set of functionalities in each area that we are, looking into improving. So definitely budgeting is in that scope, and we do have things that we are improving right now for the next version. Specific improvements per area. Well, this is as far, we just can go as far as the roadmap document itself, lets us. So all the improvements are defined in the document that you can find on customer source. So anything else, I'm sorry, we are just, a little bit tied up to reveal what actually we are planning. Because, plans are the plans, and we cannot, we need to wait until we deliver.
Yes, last
Yeah.
question.
Okay, last question. Is there a new functionality to fixed assets? Because we have, we have in Pro, when we want to buy a fixed asset and throw the purchase order, we have to use expense account because
Okay.
the budget is not working with balance account.
Yeah. We have a ready solution for you. Just open the support request, and we will be able to help. That's something that I definitely hope we will have in the next cumulative update.
We will. Yeah.
We hope. So we will, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for your time.